So for each of those inbound funnel stages, how do we measure what goes on in this particular process? Well, we can do a quantitative analysis. In other words, looking at the numbers, looking at the data, and hoping that that can illustrate and very clearly illuminate where the biggest waste happens. So typically, your marketing team can support you with using something like Google Analytics or some form of website analytics to detail for your quantitative analysis where all these drop-offs happen. We can go through a conversion rate funnel, and those conversion rate funnels will measure how many people go from stage 1 to stage 2 to stage 3 and then end up at the bottom. Thank you very much. So we'll be able to measure our conversion rate and clearly see where those drop-offs happen. Typically on something like Google Analytics, it will look something like this, where you have a lot of people at the start and going through smaller and smaller and smaller at each stage, and you can see where your massive drop-offs happen. If you want to do this yourself, what you'll need to do is you'll need to go through the application process and then copy every URL that you visit. So when you're applying online at your company, you need to take note of the website address every time at every single page that you're sent to. Sometimes we start at our own website and then go into our ATS. And again, we'll need to make note of every single URL that we're in. Sometimes it means handing that URL data over to our marketing team and going, here, measure every single one of these stages from top to bottom. These are the stages one after the other. What's our conversion rate? And they'll help you and assist you with that. Sometimes it means if you have Google Analytics skills that you can do this yourself and do a conversion rate funnel from here. So let's take an example of a role at Social Talents. We land on the home page. From here, I can see the main URL, which is simply socialtalent.co. I can click on jobs, and once I click on jobs, I'm then sent to another URL, and that URL is /other/jobs. So I'm measuring the URL at every time. I can copy that down. If I click into a very specific role, let's say, for example, an account executive, I can click on that role. Once more, I have a new URL. And this URL is partly driven by my ATS systems. My ATS now has a role number at the top, and that is what clearly defines this particular role from others. So I can probably just measure that URL, that number that's given for every single rec on my career site, and measure that in a funnel through my Google Analytics. But again, I'm just going to take note of the URLs at this stage. What happens if I click apply? I click apply, I get sent to my ATS system, a new window opens, and I have this new URL at the top. If I apply manually, where I'm going to type out in a form, once again, I can see that the number of this particular rec is contained within this particular URL. But here's the URL in full. I'm going to measure each one of these stages. Then when it comes to saying, yes, I accept the terms and conditions, which again happens in many ATS systems, is we have this random phase where we ask people to sign their life away by clicking yes to accept the terms and conditions, or I understand, etc. What happens at that URL? Do they pass that stage? Then they finally get through to a thank you very much for applying, and here's the final URL for that. So how do we get from the very beginning to the very end? Where do they start? Where do they drop off, if any? And how many people actually get through to the bottom? That's how we have to measure this for our quantitative analysis using something like Google Analytics. So copy each of these URLs for every single stage. Usually put them into something like your notepad or your text edit file, just a blank file where you can copy each of these URLs and then either give them to your marketing team for them to manage within their Google Analytics, or if you have access to Google Analytics within your own team, for you to measure this within your conversion rate funnel as well.